Hello, I want my first topic my first video to be about dispelling some misconceptions, oddly enough, because it was on my mind, about a little known genre of music that everyone has heard the term about, and that genre is called Emocore. And everyone has this misconception that the genre has anything to do with pop music or anything such as that. For instance, people think that the band My Chemical Romance and other bands such as Fall Out Boy are emo bands. And while a lot of people use the term emo to describe these bands, they are pop rock. There's nothing I have technically very much against pop rock, but they're not a part of the emo genre. And this is why. This is because emocore, or emo, is part of the genre hardcore punk. And since hardcore punk has never been and never will be pop, since it will never be pop, you can't consider emo pop music, nor does the music that emo bands make sound anything like the bands My Chemical Romance or Fall Out Boy. And this is a genre that is very old, and it started out in the 80s. It took some different waves and started having a couple different sounds, but it sounds nothing very polished or anything like is expected of mainstream music. It is not mainstream. It never, likely won't ever be mainstream. And it's wrong to call emo bands mainstream. They don't have a specific look to them, and if they looked anything like anything, they'd look more like emo. They'd look more like indie kids who wear sweaters and things than having horn-rimmed glasses. I think most of the bands wear like a t-shirt, and some of them wear like a sweater, and the short hair not covering over their left or right eye. It's a stereotype. I don't know what you can call the fashion that people associate with men wearing skinny jeans or wearing a lot of eye makeup or being skinny or oh, the hair over the eyes and dyed black hair, but it's obviously related to a mixed hodgepodge of things that doesn't need the name emo, because it has nothing to do with emo. And neither do these bands. None of them are in any way connected to hardcore punk, and therefore they are not emo, because the core at the end of emocore stands for hardcore punk, old school hardcore, and it's a version and differentiation on the style of music. If you want to check out some second wave emo bands for this little change in that, check out things like Portraits of Past. They're from 1994. Yes, for those of you, this is all a new kind of music. It started out in the late 80s with really popular bands. They didn't all accept the term. It's a term that was created by fans, and it was a term that was created by Thrasher magazine reacting to the fans. It's a skateboarding magazine. Some of the bands rejected it, including Ian MacKaye. He also, I believe, rejects his creation of straight edge. But either way, a lot of people involved in the making of it, both emocore and straight edge, which are two different things, by the way, many have rejected and many have embraced these movements. And all of the bands that were from the first wave of emocore had broken up years ago. And that's not to say emo is dead either, or that it is mainstream. The second wave emo bands took a little influence from the first. People often cite Rites of Spring as first wave emo. I have no qualms there. Second wave started experimenting with screams and more distortion elements and things. I'm not sure how to put it exactly, but it's a very folksy sort of sound. They make use of all sorts of things like violins oftentimes. No, I guess that's kind of actually does fit with the stereotype of emo, because it is kind of artsy. But the lyrics aren't primarily about relationships or suicide or anything like that. It's usually about politics or anything that's really matters to the person enough to scream and throw a fit on stage. Which is, I guess, well, would you not consider that emotional? most of the bands from the second wave, emo broke up as well. And that's not to say there's not a third wave of current emo bands. But these aren't bands either like Fall Out Boy or the mainstream sort of bands people call screamo like Underoath. Not trying to bash that to anyone who's like, oh my god, but I love Fall Out Boy, so I don't want to get into that. I know everyone hates them though. Is bands that have broken up, such as bands that were early on around 1994, early 90s when the second wave came around, was bands like Portraits of Past and such broke up and became bands like Funeral Diner and Who Calls So Loud, which is third wave emo in my belief. So yes, a third wave does exist, but it's not mainstream. And you know what types of music often does like to scream around about suicide and the like, unlike emo bands? And depression and such? Lots and lots of black metal bands and doom metal bands. And when I say screaming, especially the doom metal bands that are influenced by black metal. And so, going around calling things emo? Suicide has nothing to do with emo, and neither does depression. It's emotional by the fact that the people who write these things, usually political, or if it's something about something sad, it would be about someone else, like a friend that got raped or killed or something. It's a cathartic thing about feeling better about the world and making known about issues that are important. Punk has done that since the beginning. Black metal screams out about how much they hate Christianity. So, what gives? It's not depression. It's a kind of activism. If you were willing to scream and get emotional on stage about something that matters to you, that means it matters to you. If it's political or whatever, if you hate Christianity so much, except the shrieks are supposed to be like, oh, I'm in agony. You know what? Emos aren't trying to look like they're in agony like black metal shrieks and such. They're trying to, it's like a war cry. You know, if you're like, man, I really, really dislike capitalism because I'm a punk. You know, you're going to be yelling about capitalism. And it's a war cry. It's not, oh, I'm in such agony necessarily. You know, it's screaming as a battle cry, and there's something great and cathartic and feel good about what matters to you. Just screaming about it and getting that out, because that's from the heart. You don't just go around screaming about things you don't care about. So, and emo music is mainstream. You know, black metal bands, when they play in front of people often, they play on stage. You know, if you go to an Immortal concert, they're playing up there on the stage. You know what emo bands do? They play in basements, on the floor, with the crowd. That's not something mainstream bands do. Emo bands act even more underground than black metal. And that's supposed to be like the underground of the underground. And I have nothing against black metal. I love black metal, but I also love emocore, and it's stupid to see all these metalhead idiots in every other music form not understand what emo music is. It has nothing to do with depression and everything to do with whatever matters to you, especially politics. Screamo, whatever you call it. This is what we're talking about when we talk about emo here. This is what when Scrams and Screamo and real emo, this is what they're talking about. We're not talking about that sort of thing. And those other bands that are claimed to be emo, I don't know how this has come about, but they have nothing to do with emo. I'm not trying to attack them, and I know everyone does anyway. But what this is about is understanding what this is here. You know, the band Portraits of Past, mainstream, they barely got to sell. They were desperate to sell all of their CDs and such when they first released them out of their back trunk in 1994. And Emocore is entirely leftist political. All their music is leftist. It has nothing to do with relationships and stuff. It's about politics. Politics.